What is the difference between audio and MIDI files? MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface and don't produce any sound. It sends a signal to Logic Pro or GarageBand, which generates the sound through the computer using binary code, which is combined of zeros and ones. MIDI files contain no sound, while the performance data telling other devices what to do. MIDI files can be played in a downloadable piano teaching software called Synthesia. It sends data to the software and tells it what to play. MIDI is like a language for sending messages between different electronic signals. The quality of the playback sound depends on the quality of the sound card that's being used. Unlike MIDI, audio actually contains sound. The sound can be played around with and edited, but is usually used for listening back. Audio files are like tape recordings. They store all sound picked up by the microphone. It can be put onto devices and listened to at will. The song on your phone or iPod are audio files. What is the difference between analog and digital? In simple forms, analog is a much more simple version of something. It is a wave used in its original form with no modifications. For example, in an analog tape recorder, a signal is taken straight from the microphone and laid onto tape. An example of digital sound is autotune. While the artist is singing, the effect is added to the output, which is why their voice comes out differently. Another example is a voice changer. While your voice sounds normal on one end, the machine modifies the sound entering the microphone and comes out warped. Analog files are bigger and are harder to send through emails. However, digital sound is compressed and easier to send through emails and put onto mobiles or MP3 players. What is a sound effect library? A sound effect library is a website or folder where recorded sounds are stored for later use. Sound designers who record sounds for movies or video games keep their recorded sounds in a sound effect library. A sound effect library available for the public is freesounds.net, a website where you can search for a sound and download it. It can be used for projects created for independent use. However, if intended for commercial use, using the website is not permitted due to copyright laws. However, if a sound designer intends to use a sound not recorded by them, they would have to pay for it in advance. What is a sound designer? A sound designer is a person who records non-diegetic sound for movies. Non-diegetic sound is the sound not played in real time or not heard by the stars, rather added in afterwards during editing. The sound can be simple, but is edited to sound like something the recorders were intending. For example, the gunshots you hear in action movies can simply be someone stamping their foot or slamming a door shut. It is very different to what you're used to filming when in a media course. The sound designers can't simply download pre-recorded sounds off the internet due to copyright laws. Thus, they go out and record the sound manually. With the sound they have, they would use software such as GarageBand or Soundtrack Pro to modify the sound and make it sound like what they were going for. This is also used in video games. An example is Call of Duty. It uses lots of gunshots, so it's modified in different ways depending on the weapon the player uses and is played continuously. What is the difference between mono, stereo and surround sound? Mono is basically the simplest and very easy to understand. If you are watching a movie in mono sound, you wouldn't be able to distinguish where the sound was coming from, because it all comes out the same speakers. Stereo, however, uses panning, so it is possible for the audience to track where the sound is coming from. For example, if you're watching a movie that uses stereo sound and someone walks from one side of the screen to the other, you'd be able to distinguish where the sound was coming from because it pans from one speaker to another. Surround sound, as the name implies, is sound that surrounds the audience and creates the illusion that they are in the same room. This is mainly used in cinemas. Your modern day living room will most likely use stereo, but it all depends on your speaker layout. Televisions have options whether to use mono, stereo and digital sound. Some homes have speakers set around the corners of the room. This is ideal for surround sound. Some televisions can use external speakers or be set up to the hi-fi system and be used for stereo or surround, but yet again, it all depends on your speaker layout. Choose a sound designer and talk about them. The sound designer I choose to talk about is Ben Burt, a sound designer, film editor, director, screenwriter and voice actor. He has worked as a sound designer on films like the Indiana Jones and Star Wars film franchise, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, E.T. and WALL-E. He is most notable for creating many of the iconic sounds heard in the Star Wars film series, including the voice of R2-D2, the lightsaber hum, the blaster guns, and the heavy breathing of Darth Vader. He is also the editor of the 3 Star Wars prequels. Burt established modern sound design, especially in the sci-fi and fantasy genres. Before his work on Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope in 1977, science fiction films tended to use electronic sound effects for futuristic devices. Burt obtained a more natural sound, blending in found sounds to create effects. For example, the lightsaber hum was derived from an old film projector, combined with feedback from a broken television set. The blaster effect was created by the sound acquired from hitting a guy wire on a radio tower with a wrench. Part of R2-D2's beeps and whistles are Burt's vocals, also made using an ARP2600 synthesizer. Some of the squawks made by the tiny holographic monsters in the Millennium Falcon spacecraft are also Burt's vocals. In Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, he provides the voice of Lustrous Dauphin, captain of the Invisible Hand Cruiser. Recording his own breathing in an old decor scuba regulator created the heavy breathing for Darth Vader. What is the difference between compressed and uncompressed file formats? Uncompressed formats like CD audio, WAV, or AIFF are great examples of the sound that was recorded. If you convert something from an uncompressed format to another, it's a completely perfect copy. For example, if you rip audio off a CD into WAV format on your computer, then burn another CD using the WAV you created, the 2 CDs will be exactly the same. The only problem with uncompressed files is that they're huge. If all the audio in your 4 gig iPod Nano were uncompressed formats, you'd only be able to store 4 or 5 albums. Compressed formats are files that are made smaller in order to keep the file size quite small. The most well-known type of compressed format is MP3, but there are also a ton of others, including WMA, what Windows Media Player uses, and AAC, popular in the iTunes music store. A program converting audio into MP3 will get rid of some high frequencies that are too high for humans to hear. The advantage to these types of files is that they don't take up nearly as much space as an uncompressed file.